So going on to my next question, what are the goals and initiatives of the Haiti Action Committee?
The goals are, one, to provide support. First, to tell the story of what's going on in Haiti. That was one of the most frustrating things during when I was active. Well, I'm still active, but during the years of activism, is that many people didn't know about what was going on in Haiti and the nature of the struggle there. And so fighting Papa Doc, I ran into all kinds of misconceptions. And again, with Baby Doc Duvalier. Usually people presented Haiti as a case of charity, as a basket case, or poor Haiti, like we couldn't get it together. But without realizing that Haiti was a victim of imperialist aggression and an ongoing imperialist war to plunder the resources of the country and to exploit our brothers and sisters there. And so our goals have been to let people know about what's going on. And also when we organize visits, delegations from Haiti, brothers and sisters involved in the struggle have asked us to tell the story and to also do what we can to support them politically, financially, and most importantly, by telling the story of what's going on in order to get people to act in solidarity with the grassroots struggle taking place in Haiti for liberation and self-determination.
And the only thing I would add is that one of our campaigns, it's called to make Haiti visible.
Right.
And to make Haiti visible in the broader progressive and radical movement. Often Haiti remains marginalized. And, you know, we think that that's a lot about race and about a lack of understanding of the strategic importance of the movement in Haiti and the strategic importance of Haiti in terms of the designs of U.S. empire. You know, Haiti has always been in the crosshairs of the United States and Western European powers, and it still is today. And we're trying to, you know, really fight to get people to not see Haiti as just one of a laundry list of places in the world to think about, but as a place to take really seriously and to study and to learn from.
Thank you, thank you. I know for us, just having you guys, you know, come on here and educate us and be able to educate us on some of the questions we're going to have regarding Haiti, its contemporary history and how we got to this point. It's going to be very useful for us and the viewers to understand what's going on, how we can get involved and support, you know, the goals that you guys want to see implemented. So, you know, let's go ahead and talk about some of the contemporary history that led to this point. So I will go to the next question. So many people, you know, marked the 2004 U.S. back coup that overthrew Aristide, I believe that's his name, and the Famille Lavallage party as the start date of the era of what we see as repressive governance. The party was a social democratic party that had a lot of popular support from what I've studied. Having that overthrown had, you know, kind of caused Haiti to go into a state of turmoil from what I've read, and which has led to what we see today. And there also seems to be clear parallels between this era of Haitian history and the Papa Doc dictatorship that, you know, you experienced, Pierre. And obviously we have the long history of the imperialism, foreign intervention Haiti. The viewers may not be, but I know me and I know you two, you're aware of the role that Hillary Clinton recently played with Haiti from the Obama administration. What do you two consider the starting point? Do you consider that overthrow of Aristide to be the starting point? And what do you think is background information that's necessary for our viewers to understand, for us to be able to properly contextualize what's going on today?
I think that the overthrow of Aristide in 2004 is a defining moment in Haitian history, but I would go back further, you know, and like in terms of recent history, you'd have to look at, you know, the movement that rose up to defeat and overturn the Duvalier dictatorships in 1986. And that led to the first democratically elected government in Haitian history, and the first democratic election for president in Haitian history, in which at that time Father Jean-Bertrand Aristide, is no longer a priest, won an overwhelming electoral victory and began to institute a popular democracy in Haiti. And that was in his rule, or his governance lasted only a number of months until he was overthrown by the first coup against a Lavalas government. Lavalas is the people's movement in Haiti that had, defined the demands of the popular struggle there. So he was elected in 1990, took office in 91, and was out of office by September 30th, 1991. And there were years of terror in Haiti by the same forces that are now in power in Haiti. So he comes back into office in 2000. He wins an election again in 2000, comes back into office, and is overthrown again by, a U.S. orchestrated coup along with Canada, France, and then Haiti occupied by the UN, by UN forces to enforce the coup. And that overthrow is defines the period that we're in now. What's happening in Haiti, even though it's 17 years later,
Greetings, greetings, greetings. Hello, hello. Happy day to you. We hope that you are well today. Hope that you are at your highest point of mental, physical, and spiritual strength. And if you're not there, that you're rapidly approaching that point. We thank you and appreciate your decision to join us today for this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We are glad that you are here to join us for today's topic, which is entitled Zero Chill on Declaring that the Americas Belong to the Real Indigenous Peoples. Today is October 12th, which in this backward society is Indigenous Peoples Day. The colonizers call it Columbus Day. We don't recognize any thieves, crooks, murderers. This is Indigenous Peoples Day, and every day is Indigenous Peoples Day. Every day is African Peoples Day. Every day is the day for colonized and oppressed people to rise up. So we're glad that you joined us for this program. And really, this is going to be a little bit different. Most of the focus today is going to be calling out people who are not indigenous to the Western Hemisphere, including many of our people who claim that these are their lands. We're going to be calling that out today. That's really what this program is about. So we're glad that you're here to join us, although you may not be glad after you hear what we have to say. But the thing about that is it's important for us to learn if we don't know how, and most of us apparently don't know how, to acknowledge truth, even when it grates against our how we see the world, to still be able to deal with that and not run away the minute something happens that makes us uncomfortable. So this is definitely one of the programs that will fall within that category. So we're glad that you're here. And of course, obviously, we give honor and respect to the indigenous people. That's why we're talking about what we're talking about today. And of course, our African ancestors. That's also why we do programs like we do today, because If you are a proud African, and I am without question a proud African, then all that's going to do is help you understand, appreciate, and respect other communities who are also fighting for justice and forward human progress. You wouldn't. The only people that don't see that, that have a micro vision of the world, a small vision, and can only see their own individual community, those are people that are not intellectually or politically sophisticated. I mean, there's just no other way to say that. Those are people who don't understand the world beyond their nose. There's no other way to say that. But if you are a well-adjusted person who has done the work to understand who you are and what your people's contribution is and has been to humanity, the next logical step is that you will respect and appreciate other people who have made similar contributions to humanity. So we're glad that you are here to join us for this particular. Hit the mute button accidentally. We do our introductions as we always do, just to let those that don't know who we are. Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored each week, each time, same place, same platforms, by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. And the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass, pan African political party that is based in Africa, the national home for all people of African descent scattered and suffering in approximately 120 countries worldwide in sizable numbers. And our objective in the APRP is we are fighting for Pan Africanism. Pan Africanism. We are not fighting for entrepreneur opportunities within the capitalist empire. We are not fighting to elect a neo-colonial leader within any of these capitalist countries. We are not fighting to reform the capitalist system. We are fighting to bring about Pan Africanism, which we define correctly as one united socialist Africa, not 54 countries and then 58, including the islands, 16 in the Caribbean that are African dominated countries, Africans living all over the world in countries like this backward cesspool empire. We are fighting to center Africa and unite Africa and create a revolutionary process that brings us one unified socialist Africa. And we want that objective, which is the definition of Pan-Africanism, because we are not confused. We are convinced that that is the objective that will bring about all of the aspirations that we have and rightfully deserve as human beings and as African people. So that is our work. And we don't carry out the work on a whim. It's not an idea. Pan-Africanism is not just a concept. It's not a hope. It's not a dream. It's actual on the ground work that we are carrying out all over the African world, but of course, centered in Africa. So if you wanted to ask me today, why have you been a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party for 41 plus years? And why do you continue to be motivated to engage in this work in this organization? My answer for you would be there's a ton of good work going on out here. There's a lot of good work. There's great mutual aid work. There's great work all over the world for African people and all of oppressed humanity. But the one thing that I've always aspired since I was a very young person was to see African people unite. And I don't see any other formation that is doing that work at a higher level than the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And what I'm talking about is doing work to bring African people, whether we speak English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, whatever language we speak, whether we live on any of the 5 or 7 continents on the world, to bring us all into the same vision, to bring us all into the same work, to get us all committed to the same objective. I don't see any other organization doing any more of that work than we do. And I've been all over the world, wherever African people live, multiple times, many times over. And I see this work, and that's why I'm committed to this, because in my humble opinion, without that happening, everything else is just a pipe dream. If we don't have the level of African unity, which is our strength, then I don't really see how we can accomplish much of anything. And for me, that means worldwide African unity that is centered in Africa, not just Africans in the US, because our problem didn't start in the US. So I don't understand how it can be solved in the US. And this is other people's lands anyway, right? So I don't see how we can justifiably build a society in a land that belongs to someone else. And that's what we'll be talking about today. I don't understand those of us who expect people to respect our struggle when we don't respect theirs. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. So, Our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by myself, Ajamu, and my biological, ideological daughter, the newly anointed Dr. Shakura Umi. So, to get us started on the topic today, Zero Chill on America's belonging to the indigenous people of the real indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, I will turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you. Thank you, Baba Jamu. And apologies, you all. I don't know what's going on with my Zoom. My video is not showing. This is why I had it on for a good majority of the beginning of the seminar. I just turned it back on, and as you can see, it's just got the camera with the line through it. So definitely not trying to be antisocial or keep you from seeing my face, but honestly just trying to move forward, and I haven't had time to troubleshoot what the issue is, so please forgive us for that. I am here with you, and hopefully you all can hear my voice okay, and we're just going to move forward and do what we need to do. But this topic is one, I know I say this pretty much every weekend, but this topic is one that is really near and dear to my heart personally, because quite frankly I am very aware of the fact that African people have no sense of self when it comes to pride or connection to the motherland, the continent. It's not attractive to identify as African. This is why you have to pair it with the term American, right? Or just use the term Black, because to connect your roots back to the continent is associated with derogatory terms. It's associated with you being related to animals, and you're dehumanized, you are disregarded, you are not valued because of the propaganda that teaches us that to be connected to the continent is one of the biggest failures that a person could have in this world. And we know that that's all by design, because the oppressor, the person in power, the dominant, has every intention of continuing to steal the very resources from the richest continent on the planet, meanwhile communicating to us and teaching us that it is one of the poorest, and to be connected to Africa is one of the biggest embarrassments known to humanity. Like, that is the bottom line. And so I know I'm talking about Africans, and today we're focused on our indigenous comrades, but I said before that this is one of my favorite topics, because I think that for Africans who have no sense of identity, this is one of the most important seminars that they could watch, because they're so busy trying to connect to land that is not theirs. They're so busy trying to connect to an identity that is not theirs. There's already a group of people who get to call themselves indigenous of the Western Hemisphere. And instead of us trying to be like them, we should actually be doing our own research so that we can really tap into who we are as a people, who our ancestors were. If you haven't done that, then you have no ground to stand on when it comes to understanding even a scope, a microscope of the amount of privilege and pride that you should be holding within yourself, the amount of dignity that you should have within yourself, because of all of the people who came before you, their intentions for you to be better and for you to live a life that was better than them. I've had so many conversations about the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. I bring it up when I teach my students. I bring it up when I have presentations, when I am invited to do talks about white supremacy. I bring it up because the indigenous people's struggle is very much connected to my struggle as an African person. And I very much understand that until they get their land back, they are and not in the position to receive the dignity and the respect that they deserve, which means African people are no better off to receive the dignity and the respect that we deserve. Also, case in point, The indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, because of our longstanding relationship with several different indigenous organizations, from Brown Berets to the American Indian Movement to the Zapatistas, you can name your pick on all these different organizations that we have worked with. I have become more and more connected, more and more exposed, and more humbled by the work that indigenous folks are doing to try to get their land back. And this is why it's so important to do this work and to increase your political education, because if you're not careful, then just like Africans will say, well, there's not more than one person who is like, we don't have, I've heard Africans say, like, we don't have a Martin Luther King today. Like, I've heard Africans say that. And I would imagine, maybe, I'm not sure, but I would imagine that there are indigenous folks who would say the same thing. You know, we don't have an Anime Pictoire Aquash anymore. We don't have a Cesar Chavez, right? We don't have a, a person who's going to stand up for us, who's going to fight for us. But in actuality, that's not true. And when you're not in an organization that's working for justice, you miss information like that. You miss opportunities to meet the next Anime Pictoire Aquashes and the next Martin Luther Kings. You miss that because you're not in the fight. You're not seeing what's happening. And if you're relying on capitalist media, that's your biggest problem, because they're not going to report on that. I literally give the same assignment every semester. At the end of the semester, my students do not take a final exam, because I think that testing is a bunch of nonsense. And I don't agree that students should have to succumb to that. So I don't give an exam in that regard. Instead, what they have to do is they have to do a social justice organization presentation. And I assign the organizations to them. Every year, there are a group of students who get the American Indian Movement. You have no idea how much pride I feel as an African person asking them to research AIM. You have no idea. You have no idea. And it's so humbling, because every year, it never fails. At the beginning, the students are complaining about all this work that they're going to have to do. And by the time the presentation is over, they always say, because I always tell them, tell me what this presentation meant to you. What did this project mean to you? What did you learn? How did you grow? How did it impact you in your personal life? Whatever. And every year, it never fails. They always say, this was really life-changing. I really didn't know that much about my people. Sometimes they research about people that they are in the same lineage with, but sometimes they're not in the same lineage. And it still is motivating for them to learn about the work that's being done, especially when you tie it into health outcomes and you tie it into colonization, and just much understanding just how much colonization impacts people's abilities to be healthy. So it is beyond important, and it is beyond humbling to do this work. It is so imperative that we understand that. And we have to really dig deep into understanding, we talk about wanting a better outcome. We talk about wanting respect as a people. We want justice, yes. So then we need to be prepared to give justice. We need to be prepared to show up for the folks who have shown up for us for many, many, many consecutive years, since before a lot of us were even born, that are on this call right now. The indigenous people have been showing up for African people. You can take your pick on whoever that looks like. I continue to think about our comrade, not just Fidel Castro, but also our comrade Ernesto Che Guevara, and just all the work that different indigenous people have done throughout time to show up for African people. This is what that looks like, you all. So you can't just demand that, you have it one way, but you're not willing to show up and show out for the other folks on the other side. If we were to talk to African people today in 2025, we would see that too many of our people whine about the struggle not moving forward, but they don't really have the cojones, if you understand what I'm saying, to really ask the question, how much of them are actually aware of how they need to support other people's struggles? And again, that's capitalist propaganda, right? That teaches you that you need to be individualistic. It teaches you that you need to think about only yourself and your needs. I understand that. But again, if you don't have the political education to be critical of the fact that this system is teaching you to be self-centered and selfish, then how are you going to stop being self-centered and selfish? You don't even see that that's by design. You don't even have the ability to be critical of thinking about how that's by design, which means you're not in a position to resist it. So this is why you don't think that you need to show up for other people, but you stay steadily talking about how they need to show up for you and how they're not doing enough for you. That makes no sense to me at all. And if I were an indigenous person and you came at me with that nonsense, I would look at you like you were crazy, because that makes no sense. And in what other realm in the society can you expect something to come to you, but you do nothing to input to get it out? In what other realm in the society does that happen? If you want to insure your vehicle, you just call up AAA and they just start insuring your vehicle? No, you got to put some money down. You got to answer some questions. If you want to go get your hair done, you don't have to communicate with the barber or the hairstylist before. You just sit in the chair. No, you have to schedule an appointment. You might have to pay a deposit before that, depending on the salon you go to. In any other aspect, there's always a give and take, because this is how we learn and how we grow. And more importantly, how we start to establish trust for one another and we show up. So in social justice and in revolutionary work, it's no different. Too many of us expect people to respect and give justice when we make very little or zero effort to understand the struggles that others go through. And I will say, as we transition to the next slide, I would say the biggest critique that I have for African people is we haven't even changed the language that we're using. I have easily been saying the word unthanksgiving. I would say at least for the last decade. I probably have been saying it longer than that. You could say thanks taking. You could have another word for it. But I don't understand why we haven't modified the language that we're using. That to me is like the most disrespectful thing, because you're continuing to mention a day where thousands of indigenous people were sexually exploited. They were violated sexually. Some of them had fatal outcomes and lost their lives. A lot of them got sick because of illnesses and plagues that were going on that the European colonizer brought right to them and gave to them, knowing that it would make them sick. And you steadily are celebrating a day that was a massive, horrible, horrific event that wiped out thousands of indigenous people, to the point where we don't even talk about indigenous people today because they have literally been erased from time, literally erased from time. And I don't understand that either. I don't understand how we can just not acknowledge that. I don't understand that. That is something that needs to be mentioned day in and day out. We will never forget, and we cannot afford to forget, you all, because if we forget, then when that happens to the next group of people, which it has, we're not going to understand why there's less people fighting. We're not going to understand why there's less people making a difference for the rest of us. Not all of us are going to join organizations that's working for justice. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth. So for those of us that are fighting and that are in organizations, the last thing we want is for those folks to get killed. You got to think about it like that. If you're not willing to support Pan-Africanist or indigenous organizations, if you're not willing to join one, if you're not willing to support the cause, if you're not willing to donate, the least you can do is know what the organizations are, know of the people who are fighting in those organizations, and make sure that you do what you can to keep them safe. Because we know that we're all under attack, but specifically organizers are very much under attack. I continue to look at my networks of nearby Wi-Fis, and I continue to see the FBI surveillance. That has not changed for me since I started organizing. These are things we just have to know, you all, because it's relevant and it's important to have those conversations. So this is why it's going to be really important for you to start to think about changing your language, because when you're not in a position to understand the background of the colonizers' terms that you are promoting, that you are perpetuating, that you are literally embedding into your propaganda, right? The system has done a very good job of propagandizing you, but you have the opportunity to unpropagandize yourself. You have the initiative, and maybe you even have the right and the action to decenter the propaganda that has already come to you. You have a right to unlearn what has been taught to you. You don't have to just keep perpetuating it. And this is my critique. You don't have to keep using a term that clearly represents killing thousands of people, and a day that represents genocide, a moment in time that represents genocide and sexual unconsent, as I said before, assault. You don't have to do that. You're making a choice to do that. So I encourage you to be critical on why you're making a choice to do that. Because to me, that would be the same thing, you using that term and not modifying it to say thanks taking or unthanksgiving. You not modifying that, to me, is the same thing as you witnessing a lynching that is taking place today because they are still happening in 2025. And instead of you fighting against it, to me, by you using the original term and not saying unthanksgiving, you are literally driving up to the lynching, if you're staying with me from an analogy perspective, and you're watching this African get hung from this tree and you do nothing. That is the same thing in my head. And I'm a critical person, so you might look at it a little bit differently, but it's very much the same thing. Because when you're a part of the problem, that means you can't be a part of the solution. It can't be both ways. It can't. And anything as simple as the language that you use still contributes very much to the propaganda and to the problem. That's what we need you all to understand. You have to take responsibility for how you are helping to make this situation worse. You have to. You don't have a choice, because the oppression of Indigenous people very much affects your ability to live your life without criminalization, to live your life without institutionalized, personally mediated, or even systemic oppression or racism. Very much so. Very much so. You are very much a contributing factor to that, because at this point, you're doing the bidding for capitalist America. At this point, you're doing the bidding for imperialism by not choosing to change how you operate in this navigated world. You were doing that. You're doing their work for them. They don't even have to work as hard anymore because they have you on their side. So you have to be more critical about that. We have to imagine a system where we could trick the entire world into believing that it is doing the world a favor by stealing every single resource from everywhere in the world, subjugating the people, and then repressing the people when they resist. We should also imagine a system that has millions of people convinced that the true inhabitants of the Americas are invaders, because this is the backwards propaganda that they tell us about, while the true invaders are supposed to be respected as creators and saviors. Anywhere in time, if you know what really happened, you know that this has been a continuous formula that has been used to propagandize us. And this scenario is painting the picture that Indigenous people are the invaders. And I still don't see how that could be the case when this is literally their land. From the very tops of Canada to the very bottom of Chile, this is their land. Indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, this is their land. And when you consciously make an effort to learn the uncolonized names of the land, that is also a step in the right direction as an ally. Choosing to modify your language so you're not saying the term, but you're actually saying unthanksgiving, knowing what the name of the land was before it was colonized, so important, so critical, embedding it in your conversations, putting it in your email signature if you dare, so that every time you send out this message, people have to be reminded of what has happened. That is so important. And those are steps that we all can take. Every single one of us can take those steps. Learning, growing, being in a position where you can understand that. And if I take it back one more step, and then I'll say, I was saying before, the formula, right? So that has continued to be how we have been taught. What is going on? We even think about now. I was giving you all the example when I lived in Memphis. There was a park that was 20 minutes from my apartment named after Nathan Bedford Forrest. And if you don't know what really happened, if you don't know the history and the herstory and the theirstory, then you might think that African people have ruined this park for Nathan Bedford Forrest, but that means that you need to not know who Nathan Bedford Forrest is. That would be really important if you lived in Memphis and you did not know that he was one of the founders of the Ku Klux Klan, right? So this is how that starts to be, you all, where we start to celebrate the people by naming parks and community centers and schools after these horrific, horrible, dehumanizing people. And then the people who deserve the parks and the community centers and the schools to be named after them, we have criminalized them and arrested them, and they are now our political prisoners. They have died for the cause. We have villainized them and made them look like they have been criminals, like Anime Pictwalk, Aquash being accused of killing the members of the American Indian movement. The conversations that were being had about who could be trusted with the Black Panthers. We see this happening every single time, you all. It's time for us to wake up, because the oppressor has no new skills. The only thing they can do is just keep running with the same BS rhetorical nonsense that they have. They're not going to be innovative and come up with nothing new. So we need to get on board with what they're putting down. And we need to understand that this is not new, which means we should be less likely to trust it because we already know that it's going to end badly for oppressed people. That's a good assumption to make at this point. We don't have to imagine it because the United States of America has already made it clear, as real as the sun rising every morning. This is the reality, and this is what is happening. So we need to think more about that. Just ask yourself, why isn't there a school in the United States named after Teodora Gomez, who fought off the British from Guinea-Bissau? Why isn't there a school named after her? That is an amazing act of revolutionary bravery, right? Why isn't there a school in the US? Notice I keep framing that, named after Kwame Nkrumah. That's by design, you all. And they'll be the first to tell you that they were horrific individuals who made it harder for the Portuguese to do. That is how they will frame it. You got to be smart enough to pick up on that nonsense. You have got to be smart enough. Otherwise, you're just letting them manipulate you and you're giving them permission to do it. And I am not at a stage where I want to disregard Indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. They have done way too much for my people, way too much. It is my responsibility to stand with them because they stand with us. And if you are African and if you don't know the history and the herstory and the theirstory, you got some serious work to do. Maybe you can dedicate some time tomorrow for Indigenous Peoples Day.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Trying to get this straight here. Asante Sana, Medasi, Obrigata. And let's just continue going, speaking truth and crushing lies. That's what this is all about. So let's just deal with this myth right away, right? Yes, absolutely, you all. African people were here before the transatlantic slave trade. I mean, I am so sick to my stomach of hearing people say that like that's a revelation. Yes, we're here before Columbus. The slave trade was not the first time we came to Americas. We know this. I've known that for going on 50 years now. So I'm so sick of people saying it like it's a mic drop. We were here, no question about that. And the reason why I know it is we actually have studied and read books, and I've always done that since I was a teenager. And one of those books that I read in the early 1980s was the one on the screen there. They came before Columbus. The Ancient Presence in Ancient America, I'm sorry, the African Presence in Ancient America by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. And I'm old enough so that when I was a student at Sacramento State University in 1983 in the Pan African Student Union with Shakura's mom, we brought Dr. Ivan Van Sertima to the campus to speak. And so I actually, he talked about how the book, if you read the book, it talks to you about how we were engaged in trade. Africans came to the Americas. Indigenous people traveled east to Asia and Africa. Europeans came and uh, traveled here. The Norse people, or what they call the Vikings. These people got out, people engaged in trade. They had relationships. This is before colonialism. They had relationships with one another. You talk about the Olmec heads, which are in southern Mexico, which is depicted on the cover of Dr. Van Sertima's book. These were built by indigenous people to honor the relationships they had with the Africans who were coming to trade with them. No question. Nobody's questioning that. That's absolutely true. But Dr. Van Sertima, again, we brought him. He's been deceased for many years, but we brought him. I'm old enough. I don't fall for the okey doke. I've been around the block a few times. When we brought him to Sacramento State, he talked about everything that I just said. And so, when I was doing a workshop a few years ago at University of California, Merced, we had like 150 African students in there, and the African student told me, well, Ivan Van Sertima's book said that we have always been in America. And I'm like, you haven't read it. What do you mean I haven't read it? You haven't read it? I've read it. I've actually talked to him. And then his face got like a deer in the headlights. I'm like, that's not what his book says. You need to read it again and stop spreading confusion. So, yes, we were here. But to advance the argument that the majority of us were here always, and the majority of us here were not a part of the transatlantic slave trade without any evidence other than your emotional desire to escape being African. Like that's we're not. I'm sick of that, and we're gonna start calling that out more and more and challenging you. I love to debate any of you who believe that nonsense. Because I know you don't know what the hell you're talking about, and you know you don't know what the hell. You know you haven't studied anything, and the reason why we know that is because you'll show us pictures like the picture on the screen of this person who is apparently an African who is a part of indigenous communities. And that's your evidence. Well, look at that. That shows that we were here the whole time. That doesn't show that, fool. What that shows is that when we were on the slave plantation and we escaped, we couldn't go to South LA. We couldn't go to Compton. We couldn't go to Hunters Point or West Oakland. We couldn't go to Oak Park here in Sacramento. We couldn't go to Southside Chicago. The only place we could go was where they had restricted the indigenous people to what they call reservations. So of course we did that. And of course we intermixed. So of course we look like one another. I mean, that's just common sense. Right? I mean, that's so stupid to make a different type of argument out of that than what it actually was. That's all that is. That's all that is. But if you're so ashamed of being African, then you're going to do everything you can to deny that. I remember when I was in the 10th grade, I had very poor social skills. And you might say, well, you still have poor social skills. And maybe I do, but they're a lot better than they were then. And I didn't know how to talk to young women at all. I mean, not at all. And so I made up that I had a long distance girlfriend because I was alone, lonely, and that made me feel better. And I said that. And I said that to a lot of people until somebody called me out on it, and I'm glad they did. I mean, it's a harmless thing, but it depicts the type of things that people do when you don't feel strong enough about yourself. And the argument I'm making here is that a lot of Africans have drank the Kool-Aid of the capitalist depiction of African history and culture. And they drank the Kool-Aid and accepted the master's version of our history that we've never accomplished anything, we've never contributed anything to society, and that everything we are is because of this white capitalist society. And so, because they've drank that Kool-Aid, either consciously or unconsciously, they have accepted that version of history. And so they want to separate from this African reality, which in their backward mind perpetuates that version of history, and connect themselves to the Americans because that in their minds is a more prestigious way. They're not really even connecting themselves to the indigenous people because just by making the claim that they're always here, they're disrespecting the real indigenous people. So they're really just trying to connect themselves to the U.S. empire. That's really what that's about underneath when you dust off all the layers. That's really what's going on there. So what we're saying to you today is that that's not acceptable. It's disrespectful to our African ancestors, and it's disrespectful to the indigenous people. Of course, everyone is indigenous to somewhere, right? But by indigenous, we mean that all the scientific evidence in history illustrates that your people are the original people to exist in the region. You're the original people that develop the culture that defines that region. That's the definition of indigenous people. To develop the culture in that region and to advance human existence there. That's the definition of indigenous. And that is not African people in the Americas. That's not what we have done here. We have certainly used our African culture to survive 500 years in this backward empire, but we have not shaped We have not shaped the culture and history of the Americas. And we need to stop telling those lies because it's disrespectful to everybody for us to say that. We are Africans here who have developed ways to exist in this backward cesspool empire. But we need to tell the truth. And the truth is the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere are the people who call themselves Indians because Indians means close to God in Latin. So if you go on so-called reservations, and I've been to many of them, that's what people there call themselves. You know, it may not be what people on college campuses call themselves, but that's what the masses still use that term. So if they use the term Indian or Native or Indigenous or Chicano or Mexicano or Puerto Ricano or Colombian or Chilean or whatever way they identify themselves based on, you know, whatever their level of consciousness about their collective condition is, those are the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. You Africans are not the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. Some of us are, some of us have been here thousands of years, but that number is not even large enough. It's a negligible number of us. And y'all need to stop telling those goddamn lies. You sitting there, your black ass family is from Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana, Tennessee, all of these slave states. You running around here with a European name that the master gave you when you were on the goddamn slave plantation, talking about you being indigenous to the Americas for thousands of years. And I understand there's a small percentage of us who were in those places who got those names from the Europeans because we didn't know our African languages because we had traveled over here thousands of years ago and we lost that. But that's a minute number of this. And for people to suggest in 2025 that that's a significant portion of us, as if to uh, actually try to suggest that a significant number of us, even some of them imply a majority of us, didn't go through the transatlantic slave trade, that is a goddamn lie. And you need to stop it and get therapy to help you deal with your insecurity about being African. That's all there is to that. And so that's the case there with our people. We are African people. Pick up a book and learn something about Africa and stop being such a disgrace to our people's legacy. Period. That's it. And then in terms of these Europeans who are always talking about, you know, this land is our land, everybody comes from Africa, we're all here. Look, there's no question about this. If you call yourself an American, whether you say you're a white American or just an American, African American, Mexican American, Asian American, idiot American, whatever the hell kind of American you place on your name, you are advocating and promoting white supremacy as a system because American identity equals white supremacy. There is no way to refute that, no way whatsoever, because this American concept, this concept of an American society, all of this white identity, all of this backward nonsense is about colonialism, exploiting and expropriating everything from African people, indigenous people, Asian people, and doing that and covering that up with this identity of America. America is a settler colony, just like the Zionist state of Israel, just like Australia, just like Azania, South Africa, a settler colony, just like so many places in Oceania, a settler colony. That means Europeans came here, stole this land, and put their name on it, put their ugly ass red, white, and blue flag on it. Damn toilet paper, not even good enough to touch my ass. Not even good enough to touch yours if you got good sense. The only thing it's good for is being burnt so you can warm up from it. That's the only value that the goddamn rag has. But they have lifted this up as an identity in this society. And so many of these white people run around here talking about, well, what if this is the indigenous people's land? What about us? What the hell about you? Kayak your white ass back to Europe. If you can't live here and respect the fact that this is indigenous people's land, get your white ass out of here. This is not your land. It never has been, and it never will be. And the indigenous people, if they exercise their full self-determination, which they will, they have no responsibility to make this society about centering you. You have never made this society about centering them, so they have no responsibility. And we hope they never do center you. In fact, it's not my business. I think they center you too much right now. Y'all need to, my humble recommendation is have a movement like we had. They used to be all up on us like that during the early stages of the civil rights movement. They were all in it, telling us what to do, acting like they were African, doing all the dysfunctional shit that I see them doing with indigenous people and Palestinian people today. But the reason why they don't do that now, you don't see them at our events, at our meetings, in our cultural centers. You don't see them because we had a Black Power movement in the 1960s. And that movement said, white people go organize white people. We don't need you telling us what to do. You doing that has done absolutely nothing to move us forward. Get your white asses out of our circles. Now, of course, there have always been European people who understand the assignment. We're not talking about you. And if you're those people, you know we're not talking about you. We're talking about liberals primarily. As Malcolm X said, I prefer neo-Nazis to liberals, white liberals, because at least we know where the neo-Nazis stand. The white liberals pretend like they're our friends. They've never been our damn friends. And I'll never be their friend because all they do is everything possible until they have a level of discomfort. The minute you tell them something like American identity is white supremacy, they can't hear that because now you're not centering them and they don't know how to deal with anything that's not centering them. So we say to hell with them. To hell with them. They are no better than the neo-Nazis. No better, no different. We don't see any different than them. I remember we were at a meeting. I was at a meeting in Portland, and a bunch, if you're in Portland, that tells you automatically it's a ton of Europeans there. And it was a community meeting, and they were talking about some of the people who called themselves leftists there were talking about something. And they said, well, how come no white people can join the All African People's Revolutionary Party? And I said, because left or right, still white. That's why. Left or right, still white. That's why you can't join us. Because our effort is all about trying to deconstruct 500 years of trauma from being subjugated by you folks. So how the hell are we going to do that with you sitting up in the room with us, talking to us? Because we're all trained by colonialism. So if you had an African event, the minute a lot of Europeans come in there, a lot of us are trained to center them and make sure they're comfortable. And a lot of Europeans are trained to think that everything is about them and their point of view. You can't refill. All you got to do, you don't have to take my word for that. Just go to any kind of session and you'll see it. I had self-defense class Thursday night. And there was an older white gentleman that came in. And the minute we were just doing introductions of names. And he's like, I thought this was going to be something different. I said, you don't know what it's going to be. So why don't you just stop talking? I said, excuse me. You don't know what this is going to be. So maybe you're in the wrong place. You're welcome to leave, but we're just doing introductions. So then we went through the political education. We went through the martial arts training. Then afterwards, he came up to me, you know what? I apologize. This was the best class I've ever attended. And I'm like, well, I appreciate the apology, but next time, stop coming in the room with your white identity leading the way. Learn how to be in spaces that aren't about you. He was the only European in the room. Well, one of the few. There are only a couple, and the other ones already know, to come in with a respectful attitude. But just learn how to do that. And I told him, I'm going to talk about you on Sunday on our program. I don't want you to talk about, well, then you should have came in here different. Because I'm not under any obligation to protect your arrogance. Like, we're trying to educate people. So I want you to come back because you obviously see things differently, but you need to use this space to understand how you've been trained to function in this society, because we're not going to stand for that. The other communities, they're at the point where they're still dealing with that. I don't know why they are, but we're not going to do that. When they come in our thing and they try to take over like that, they get shut down immediately. Immediately shut down. And y'all don't give a damn if you think we're not being rude. We're being respectful of who we are and asserting our rights as human beings. So you Europeans, stop using, and all y'all non-Europeans, stop using American in your right. Cut that shit off. Just call yourself Asians. Call yourself Africans, like we do. That's the correct title anyway. Call yourselves indigenous people. Just do that. Stop calling yourselves Americans, because every time you do that, you promote the American empire, either consciously or subconsciously. That's what you're doing. So don't come to me saying, well, I'm an African American, I'm an Asian American, I'm a white American, I'm whatever, and I'm against white supremacy. No, you're not. You're absolutely for white supremacy. You're perpetuating it. Just by calling yourself that, you're perpetuating it. This is not your land. I was at a demonstration against this center a few years ago. This center that when they had the children there, the immigrant children, they were doing that, and we were protest. It was the last one in this region here. We were up there. There was a protest. We were up there helping with security, and the white woman got on the mic. I was standing next to an indigenous sister. I didn't know her, but we gravitated to each other because we both had militant spirits, and we didn't like the spirit of what we saw, heard, and saw being said. So we were talking to each other while we were standing there, and the white woman got up there and started had one of the had a banjo or guitar, acoustic guitar, whatever the hell. Whenever I see one of them get up with one of them, I know it's going to be something that I'm not trying to participate in. And she started playing "This Land Is Your Land," and me and the indigenous sister immediately like, hell no, stop. And we went up to the mic, and they let the indigenous sister speak, and she spoke truth, and that was good. We're like, and the guy asked me, well, what was the problem? I'm like, we don't want to hear that shit. We don't want to hear that, and we're not going to hear it. It's not everybody's land. This is their land. Is your house everybody's house? Give me the keys to your goddamn house if you believe that. So this is what we're saying. American identity equals white supremacy. Period. Dot. And so the takeaways, you all, the things we want to get from this, and you notice we haven't even talked about indigenous people. We don't have to say anything about them. It's their land. That's secure. We're talking about all these other clowns and buffoons who are infringing on their right to have self-determination. So Dr. King said it. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So we don't want to hear any of you coons on here. And I'm using the word coon. That's what the hell you are. We don't want to hear any of these coons talking about, well, we don't need to be talking about their struggle. They're not talking about ours. Well, first off, they are talking about ours, but you don't know that because you're not in any organization. You're not involved in any liberation work. All you're doing at best is getting on social media and vomiting virtual out your mouth without any study or any knowledge or any actual work taking place. So that's why you're confused and you don't know any better. But those of us who are actually out here, and the reason why I can talk like this is because I put my life on the line on a regular basis to defend our community. On a regular basis, I do that. Put my physical body on the line on a regular basis to do that. So I'm not just somebody that's just running my damn mouth. So I can talk like this. And all you got to do is shadow me, and you'll see that what I'm talking about is true. I invite you to come to Sacramento and shadow it and do that. Or talk to the police agencies you work for, and they have all the evidence of that. So there's no reason why we shouldn't talk the way we talk, because we know that communities are talking about us. They're lifting us up. They're telling people that we have been in the forefront of the struggle. I've heard them do that. All communities, the Palestinian community, the Asian community, the indigenous community, I've heard them do that many times. So shut the hell up. Run DMC had a record back in the 80s. Shut up. You talk too much. That's what many of you all need to. You need to get that record and play. Whenever you start feeling like running your damn mouth about something you haven't taken the time to do the work to properly understand, put that record on. Shut up. You talk too much, because that's your record. They made that record for you. You talk too goddamn much. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. And some of us are sick of that. We don't want to hear you anymore. All you're doing is intellectually masturbating and making it harder for those of us who are serious about trying to do some work out here. So, yes, we're going to talk about all the struggles because we know they're all interconnected. And you can't say that, like, you talk about other, I do more for our people in 1 month than you've done your whole life. So don't try to create, don't even, you can't say well, you're not prioritizing our people. I've done nothing for the last 45 years except prioritize our people. But I also know that because I'm a proud African, that's going to make me conscious of a whole lot of things. So justice for African people means stop playing these ignorant and disgraceful identity games. Study our African history and stop doing to indigenous people what the European colonizer has done to us. That's what that means. And then for you Europeans, you're either going to denounce American identity or we will just know where you stand. The days of being confused by your liberal games are long over with. And don't get me wrong, I do a lot of work. I do a lot of work with groups that would be identified as white liberal groups. But to do the work with them, there's always a conversation first. And I tell them, like, look, this is who we are in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. They want security training, that sort of thing. I tell them, I'll work with you. I'll help you. I'll help you train and get prepared. But this is what you got to do first. You can't work with no police. You can't have no American flags. You can't have nobody talking about American identity or none of that stuff. And you got to be talking about the right kind of justice things. So take this information, study it, think about it. If you want to work with me, come and do it. Well, yeah, had one like, if you can, we can use your sound to come in good. I said, but if somebody gets up doing any of that stuff, they're gonna be talking without sound. So this is how we deal with them, right? It's time for true warriors for justice to put a stop to all this nonsense. And that's exactly what we're going to do. The Americas belong to the indigenous people, and they must get their lands back. They must get control of these lands, not elect some individual indigenous person as a symbolic gesture of forward progress that does nothing to help the conditions for the masses of indigenous people, not create more casinos. Sure how to help you with that see, that's the police there. You hear that? You can help me by staying out of my damn conversation. That's the police talking. So that's what that means, is that not getting more casinos, that's not helping the masses of indigenous people. We need to build up our struggle and support them in building theirs. They support us in building ours, and they take control of this movement and build self-determination in these lands, because these lands belong to them and nobody else. So we want to thank you for joining us. We invite you back next week, October 19th. We're going to be talking about concrete Pan-African work in 2025 and beyond. We're going to be focused on the Festival African Youth Conference, which is taking place as we speak in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. We have a very significant All African People's Revolutionary Party presence there, as well as the presence of many of our sibling parties, the Democratic Party of Guinea, the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau, the PAIGC, all of these sibling parties that we are fused with are at that youth conference, and they are doing phenomenal work on there. So we're going to talk about this concrete work to bring about African unity, centering Africa. So we want to invite you to join us. You're not going to find out about that anywhere else. Well, not too many other than what we're doing. You're not going to find out about it. So come on through and tell people to join you. And the QR code in the upper left-hand corner, the red and white one, you can scan that and get information on all of the AAPRP programs. So we invite you to do that, as well as you can go to the Forward Ever Shop. And please tell people about the Forward Ever Shop. You can buy clothes that have revolutionary Pan-African messages, help us spread that word. And then if you're in Sacramento here, we invite you to our Thursday night self-defense classes. We've been doing it every week since May. This past Thursday was really one of my favorite classes. It gave me a ton of ideas about how we're going to ramp it up for next week and going forward. So if you're in this area, you're really missing something really positive. So you should come out. So tell people, even if you're not here, you know people that live in this region, tell them about it. Tell them to come out. 6 to 8 p.m. at 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15. 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15, 6 to 8 p.m. every Thursday night. You don't have to sign up. You don't have to pay anything. Just come with a positive attitude and a desire to build community. There's always snack foods available. Just come on through and join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Go to www.aaprp-intl.org. Join the AAPRP. If you're African, you're qualified to do that. We'll help you with every other element of it. But if you're African, you're qualified. So come on through and join the AAPRP. The QR code in the bottom right, the black and white one, that is for Burkina and Niger books. We have our comrades there in the FIPAN conference there right now in Burkina Faso. They are doing wonderful work in the Sahel region. We ask you to support it. If you click on that, if you scan that QR code, you can become a monthly sponsor. Please do that. Even if it's $10 a month, just do it. It's we're buying revolutionary literature so we can build revolutionary Pan-African consciousness on the African continent. That's a part of the work to bring about revolutionary Pan-Africanism. We can't, as Kwame Ture told us, we can't have revolution without revolutionaries. So we're creating revolutionaries through positive revolutionary political education. We're doing that all over the world. So help us do it in the Sahel region of Africa by sponsoring that program. And finally, my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. Unfortunately, it can only be purchased one way, and that's through Amazon. We're using their platform because they will do all the printing and all the shipping, and we don't have to come out of pocket for that. And we searched around, we couldn't find anyone else to publish the book. A lot of people wanted to, they just didn't have the resources. So this is where we are. The book is all over the world, thousands of copies. So you should buy it if you don't have it. It's a great book on organizing. And if you do have it already, then form a book club and have people order it and start doing some consistent political education. Make that the first book you read. Call your local library. That's just a phone call and tell them, hey, order this book. Can you order this book and put it in there? They'll do it. People do it all the time. Just do that. Help us with this work because 100% of the proceeds from this book go towards the anti-fascist work. I'm at the point where I got dozens of people who are ready to spar. I need to buy some headgear for them. So help us out. Help us out by doing this work, helping support this book. Forward ever, backwards never. Stay strong. See you next week.